So we're not going to be in Genesis today. We are going to focus on Thanksgiving, and this I kind of laughed to myself yesterday. So I'm not one that usually believes in superstitions or jinxing yourself or anything like that, but I've always had a pretty hard and fast rule. You do Thanksgiving and then you get ready for Christmas. So we had already made an exception here at the church because we recognize that there's just not enough time, right, to get it all done. And so we're decorating for Christmas. Well, that was okay. Well, then we realized if we don't decorate our house for Christmas, we're going to be gone to family and stuff like that. Then it's not going to get done. And literally, Christmas stuff would be up for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, I'm not going through all that work for it to be only 2 weeks. And so yesterday, we start decorating for Christmas at the house. And of course, it's a new house, so we're figuring out how we want things. And it has a lot of the gables that go like this, which look really cool if you put lights on there, right? Problem is, it's like 50 feet in the air. And so I'm on my extension ladder, and I'm up there putting, and I realized this is the most dangerous thing I've done all year. And how stupid is that? And then I was like, I'm actually thankful that this is the most dangerous thing. That's a pretty good life, right? That the most dangerous thing I've done all year is put up Christmas lights. And then I started wondering, I wonder how many people die every year from putting up Christmas lights. And so I Googled it, and there's not hard and fast numbers, but it did say that, and this was back between 2015 and 2017, during the holiday season, an average of 250 people a day go to the emergency room because of some sort of an injury related to decorating. 10 people every year, at least, are killed because they actually plug in the lights and it causes a fire. So we still haven't made it past that because I haven't plugged in the lights yet. So we're still got a chance. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I really did start thinking about that. I was like, this truly is the thing that I was nervous about. I was like, this is really like the worst that it gets as far as for the safety, my safety. Man, we are so blessed. We have so much to be thankful for, right? I mean, if you look throughout history, just making it through the day was a challenge for people, right? Having enough food to eat, being safe. We have so much, and I get so frustrated because I feel like we are less thankful, and we have kind of, as a culture, we're pushing away thankfulness. And I understand why, because we live in a secular world, right? That is always going against what the principles of God are. And so I understand why, but I really started thinking about, well, why do we want to push away Thanksgiving? Why do we want to push being thankful away? And I think there's something very powerful in that, and being thankful is such an ally to us if we are truly thankful, because it does change how we engage with the world around us. So it's obvious to me why that would be under attack. And you see it in subtle ways. I don't think this is like an all-out assault on Thanksgiving. No one is saying that we shouldn't celebrate Thanksgiving or anything like that. But we see it subtly just in the consumerism, right? Thanksgiving is not a consumerist holiday. And they may have tried to at times, but it's never become that, right? Thanksgiving is a very simple holiday. It has always been one where you just get together with your family and you give thanks, right? And so it's really interesting now how the consumerism has focused on Halloween. I don't know if you've noticed that. Halloween has become bigger and bigger, right? You see that marketed a whole lot, and then you go from there right to Christmas, where Christmas is marketed a lot. And so, while Christmas, we all know what the true meaning of Christmas should be, but we've been able to, the consumerism has been able to kind of overshadow that. And Thanksgiving, we just kind of skip over. And I really started thinking about how important it is for us to recognize Thanksgiving, recognize why we need to be thankful. And thankfulness is tough because it requires a few things on our part. It requires us, one, to have perspective, right? Our culture doesn't like perspective now, right? And it also requires us to be honest about looking at our life, looking at the ups and the downs, looking at our successes, looking at our failures, right? Being honest with that. And whenever I started thinking about that, you got, okay, to be thankful, we need to have a good perspective of things. We need to be honest with what's going on. But the biggest one, in order to be thankful, you have to acknowledge that you are not in control. You have to acknowledge that. And that is something that we don't like to do. Because to truly be thankful, not just to say thank you when someone, gives you something or, does something for you, but to truly be thankful, you have to acknowledge that you're not in control and actually that there is something bigger than you. And culturally, we don't like that. In fact, the premise of what's kind of going on in a secular culture is it is making it all about you. It is saying you can control your future. You can do this. Do what you need to do to make yourself happy, right? And I mean, we see elements of it within secular culture that's trying to just push the existence of God out, right? That's always, has always and will always be part of that secular attack on people of faith, if you will. But in order to truly be thankful, we have to acknowledge that. And so no wonder that our culture is kind of uncomfortable with Thanksgiving. Right? It's an acknowledgement that, wow, there's something bigger out there, that we can't do this on our own, that we need something else. And one of the ways that I've, and this is more of just perception, but one of the ways our culture has tried to skip past Thanksgiving is we stop even thinking about where it even came from, where it originated, the importance of that. Because it does go to the beginnings of our country, right? And so everything kind of becomes mixed up in political stuff now if you're not careful. But there's some really amazing things that we can learn whenever we kind of look back at, okay, how did we get to here? Where the most dangerous thing I do is put up Christmas lights, right? How did we get to that place? And so I started looking at some writings and things like that from 1620. So, if you remember, and I asked my girls if they do this at school much, and they knew a little bit, and they've known from what we do. But I remember in elementary school, basically doing little projects and stuff like that of the first Thanksgiving, right? Of when the Pilgrims and the Native Americans came together and they celebrated a meal, right? And it was simplified, right? And we know, again, to be truly thankful, we need to have perspective, we need to have honesty. We know that wasn't always a smooth, simple thing. But I think sometimes we pushed out the truth of what actually happened with the Pilgrims and the Native Americans because of things that have happened in other areas. There's been some atrocities that have happened in other areas. With Plymouth, it was actually a pretty beautiful thing that happened. Right? And I want to read this. There's only really two kind of original writings that talk about the first Thanksgiving. So this goes back to around 1620, that area. This is from Edward Winslow. And forgive me, because things are spelled really weird in 1620, and so I don't know how to pronounce them. But this is in the Old English. It says, our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, so that so we might after special manner rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, They four in one day killed as much fowl as with a little help besides served the company almost a week, at which time amongst other recreations we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and amongst the rest their greatest king, Massasoit, and some 90 men, whom for 3 days we had killed. 3 days we entertained and feasted. And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partake of our plenty. All right. So there, of course, they weren't making a big deal of this, but they had developed a relationship with the Native Americans there, and they celebrated. They actually started the longest peace treaty. I believe it's the longest peace treaty between Europeans and Native Americans that was not broken. It went the longest amount of time, was the one between the Pilgrims of Plymouth and the Native Americans there. It was, and they did work together. And it's important, I think, for us to kind of celebrate that, to recognize, man, that's a good part of our history, right? And I was reading some more. William Bradford, he wrote this. This was he had a lot of original writings. He was one that signed the original Mayflower Compact, things like that. And he wrote this as he was kind of looking back on just how God had been with them during this time. And he says, may not and ought not the children of these fathers rightly say, our fathers were Englishmen which came over this great ocean and were ready to perish in the wilderness, but they cried unto the Lord, and he heard their voice and looked on their adversity. Let them therefore praise the Lord, because he is good, and his mercies endure forever. Yea, let them which have been redeemed of the Lord show how he hath delivered them from the hand of the oppressor, when they wandered in the desert wilderness out of the way, and found no city to dwell in, both hungry and thirsty, let their soul was overwhelmed in them. Let them confess before the Lord his loving kindness and his wonderful works before the sons of men. And as I read that, I realized he's quoting Psalm 107. And so I started thinking about just the connection with Thanksgiving and recognizing what all that they had been through. If you remember the history, they had left Holland because they had been pushed out of England because of religion. They were not able to practice their religious beliefs in the way that they wanted to. They were in Holland. They actually left Holland to start a church. And I'll read here in just a little bit. That was their mission, is they wanted to start a new church. They wanted to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Right? And that's why they came over. They came over as families. They didn't come over to conquer. They came over to start a new colony and have it based on religious liberty and freedom. Right? And we know that wasn't the case with everyone who came over, but that's what they wanted, and that's what drove them to do it. And that first year, nearly all of them died. I mean, it was unbelievable how many died. But they persevered, and they kept moving forward, and they kept having this attitude of thankfulness. You see it in their writings of being thankful of how God was continuing to be with them. So I want us to look at Psalm 107. It's a powerful passage and a powerful psalm of thanks, and one that speaks to us today. Starts off, it says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say this, those he redeemed from the hands of the foe, those he gathered from the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south." So it's starting off, it says, giving thanks. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Recognizing that God is good no matter what the circumstances are, right? That's part of that perspective, having a solid perspective and being honest, knowing, yeah, there's sometimes things are not good, but that doesn't mean that God is not good. But that takes perspective. That takes choosing to be thankful, right? But it's based on God being good and his mercy and his love enduring forever, right? Having that hope for a future that God has been and always will be with us, right? And then I love how it says, let the redeemed of the Lord say this. And so it's like the redeemed, we need to be sharing that story. We need to be remembering that story of how God has been with us. We need to remember how God was with those early pilgrims and they came over and how they were thankful and how that's part of our history, right? We need to remember the ugly stuff that happened. We need to remember all of it, right? And we need to develop an attitude of thanksgiving in the midst of all of it. And so then it continues, and I love what it does. It basically, and you may find yourself in one of these places. The psalm continues on in verse 4. It says, some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no way to a city where they could settle. They were hungry and thirsty, and their lives ebbed away. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men, for he satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. Some sat in darkness and the deepest gloom, prisoners suffering in iron chains, for they had rebelled against the words of God and despised the counsel of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble. He saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness and the deepest gloom and broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. For he breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron. Some became fools through their rebellious ways, suffered affliction because of their iniquities. They loathed all food and drew near the gates of death. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent forth his word and healed them. He rescued them from the grave. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. Let them sacrifice thank offerings and tell of his works with songs of joy. Others went out on the sea in ships. They were merchants on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep, for he spoke and stirred up a tempest that lifted high the waves. They mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunken men, and they were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders. I love those pictures that this psalm is giving. Pictures of being in the wilderness, of wandering, of not knowing your way, of not knowing where you're headed, what your purpose may be, right? Of wandering aimlessly, but crying out to the Lord, and he shows you a way. He shows you the direction to the city, right? And then it says, let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love. Right? Then it goes to this place of darkness where we are enchained. You know, all of us can relate to that at some point. Sometimes those are chains that we've kind of shackled on ourselves. Sometimes it's just the chains of sadness, of devastation, of what's going on in life, and we feel like we're in that dark place. But when we call to him, he breaks the chains, he frees us from the darkness, and says, let them all give thanks to God for his unfailing love. Right? Then we see it talks about those who go into rebellion, who intentionally have chosen to go their own way, right? And for us, sometimes we see that and we say, well, they've chosen to go that way. Have fun. Deal with the consequences. Well, you will deal with the consequences, but when you reach that point where you've had enough and you turn and you cry out to God, he reaches out and he brings you back to him. And so when we've been in that place, when we look back in our lives and we know that, man, I can remember when I've been there, what should our response be? To give thanks to God for his unfailing love. And then that last one is kind of this sense of adventure. Those who go off into the seas and and go. And I view this as those who just are going and hitting life head on. They're not doing anything wrong. They're moving forward. They have big dreams. They have big hopes. And they're going and everything is going well. They're seeing the presence of God, and then all of a sudden the storm comes. And all of that courage that they had built up is just sapped away because they realize we can't do this on our own. And so they cry out to God. And God calms the storm. And he shows them the way through. And the response is, give thanks to God for his unfailing love. I love the different pictures that this psalm brings. These different places in our life. All of them that are a mixture of good things and bad things, of triumphs, of failures. But through it all, the response is that we choose to give thanks to God. We choose to give thanks to him. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds. Right? Man, if we do that, it changes the way that we approach life. You know, people are trying to figure out how to find happiness, how to find satisfaction, how to find purpose. Man, one of the key ways is to be thankful. And being thankful doesn't mean that we're just pretending everything was great, right? No, we actually, to be truly thankful means you acknowledge when you were in the wilderness, when you acknowledge that, man, I was in the darkness, I was in chain, that you acknowledge, man, there were times that I was in open rebellion towards God. And there were a lot of bad things that happened because of that, and they may still be impacting me, right? That we acknowledge that, but we can be thankful for God in all of it, because at some point we recognize, you know what? I can't do this on my own. I need him. That is the heart of being thankful. You know, this is a concluding writings. The first part is a commentary on a lot of what William Bradford had done, but the last is actually some of his writings. But it says, just over 50 pilgrims survived the first winter. But from them came more than 30 million descendants in a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Most importantly, their vision was one of holy, Christ-centered, multi-generational faithfulness. This is what William Bradford, this was one of the main reasons that he wrote for them to come and make this journey. He said this, he said, last and not least, they cherished a great hope and inward zeal of laying good foundations, or at least making some way toward it, for the propagation and advance of the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in the remote parts of the world, even though they should be but stepping stones to others in the performance of so great a work. Thus, out of small beginnings, greater things have been produced by his hand that made all things of nothing, and gives being to all things that are, and as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled hath shone unto many. Yea, in some sort to our whole nation, let the glorious name of Jehovah have all the praise. One thing that he wrote really jumped out to me. He wrote this. He said, so they committed themselves to the will of God and resolved to proceed. Right? They just continued to move forward, recognizing that there were going to be ups and downs, recognizing there were going to be challenges, there were going to be successes and failures, but through it all, they knew they were going and they were trying to do what God had called them to do. And they had an attitude of thankfulness that they had been called, that they had this opportunity. And I encourage each one of us to look at our lives, to look back at how God has been with us through the successes and the failures and the highs and the lows, and to be thankful for his presence, to be thankful for his unfailing love. And as we look forward to whatever may come, we can be thankful because we know that God is already there that he will be with us, whether we're in the wilderness, whether we're in the darkness, whether we're just engaging in the adventure of life. God is going to be there. And for that, we can be thankful. Let's go to him in prayer.